On our broadcast tonight, on all fronts, a new year and new security nightmares now at our airports, a new hotbed of al-Qaeda activity overseas, and new worries about U.S. readiness. We have it all covered tonight. Deadly double cross, how a terrorist infiltrated the CIA and left 7 agents dead. We have exclusive details. Women's Health, our new series here this week, begins with a look at symptoms you cannot ignore. And making a difference. Look at how much there is to learn when the school day lasts all day. Nightly News begins now.
From NBC News World Headquarters in New York, this is NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams.
Good evening. Airline and airport security is being tightened up even further around the world in response to the failed attempt to blow up a plane on final approach into Detroit on Christmas Day. It's now tougher to get here from certain nations. It's tougher to predict what you can carry on a plane or keep in your lap or when you can use the restroom. And yet all it took last night for the whole system to come tumbling down was one man who walked on the wrong side of the security screening lane at Newark Airport. The terminal was shut down, no flights in, no flights out, and travel plans were ruined in a chain reaction across the country. We begin our reporting on all of it tonight with Pete Williams at the Department of Homeland Security in Washington. Pete, good evening.
Brian, about 2,000 flights a day arrive in the U.S. from overseas. Now the Department of Homeland Security is requiring more intensive screening for many of the passengers who fly on them, including some Americans. Among the first of the world's airports to adopt the new rules were Benazir Bhutto International in Pakistan and Germany's largest airport in Frankfurt.
I would rather have a little more time in my travels and a safe, efficient ride than something bad happening.
Hello. Airlines that fly to the U.S. from overseas must now give full-body pat-downs and physically inspect the luggage of all passengers from or traveling through countries considered high risk. 14 countries where terror groups are known to operate or draw support, including Nigeria, where the accused Christmas Day bomb plotter is from. And other overseas passengers must be selected at random, including some returning Americans, for the same enhanced screening.
We have provided now for 100% enhanced screening for people who have either traveled from or have passports from certain countries of interest.
But an Arab American group says the new screening rules sweep too broadly, stereotyping people from the countries singled out.
We had one Nigerian attempt something horrible. Now we're labeling every single Nigerian, and I forget how many million they are, as a possible terrorist. That's foolish.
Today at the airport in Newark, one of the 3 serving New York City, a different kind of security failure. Airlines were frantically working to get through a backlog of passengers stranded last night after a man apparently eager to meet an arriving passenger walked around security screeners, forcing a shutdown of the busiest concourse and setting off 6 hours of chaos.
What became an ominous sign was they began to push people out who had already gone through security. And
NBC News producer Claire Duffy was among thousands stranded with no idea what was going on.
People were on every square inch of every part of the terminal on all 4 levels, all crammed in on the floors. No one could tell us anything. When they did begin to open one of the concourses and open the security screening, people just pushed forward. People very easily could have been trampled, and now everyone was being rescreened, and that included people who were already on planes that had backed off the gate. We did finally get up through security, only to find our flights had been canceled.
Tonight, the Transportation Security Administration says it's trying to figure out why one of its officers failed to react when the man bypassed the security screeners. TSA says it's considering disciplinary action. Brian?
Pete Williams starting us off in Washington tonight. Pete, thanks. Tom Costello covers aviation for us. We've asked him to join us tonight for more on this. And Tom, this was a nightmare last night at a major airport on a big night for flying, people scurrying home. But it happens all the time, and the margin between the system working and not was as thin as the plexiglass wall. Guy goes down the wrong aisle, and the airport gets, in effect, shut down. Who do we see about it, and what's the solution?
Well, senior TSA agents have always said in candid conversations that guarding against the glassy eye syndrome is a big challenge. Officers losing their focus after staring at a screen all day or manning a checkpoint all day. A combination of factors were at work last night, as you mentioned. One of the busiest concourses in the country, Concourse C at Newark, on one of the busiest travel nights of the year, coming back from New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. The TSA and all security personnel are already on this heightened state of alert because of the Christmas Day bombing attempt, and they have zero tolerance right now for anything that looks amiss. But the human factor can both be the strongest and I would say the weakest link in guarding against terrorism. It's the border agent who notices something's not quite right at the Canadian border and prevents the Millennium bombing. It's the quick-thinking passengers on that Delta flight on Christmas Day, or the failure of this TSA agent to act quickly enough when something isn't quite right on Concourse C. The human factor is often the big variable.
Tom Costello in our Washington newsroom tonight. Tom, thanks. Now, because this Christmas Day bombing plot was reportedly hatched by al-Qaeda in Yemen, a lot of people are suddenly learning about Yemen for the first time, though many in the anti-terrorism business have been following it closely for years and years. The government of Yemen is weak but friendly to the United States. Today, it claimed to have killed 2 al-Qaeda militants. It's all getting a lot of attention from the Obama administration. We get more from our chief foreign affairs correspondent, Andrea Mitchell.
Into the cold, the Obama family returned from balmy Hawaii as Yemen rose to the top of the president's national security concerns. In Yemen, France and other Western countries joined the U.S. and Great Britain in closing embassies. Officials told NBC News because of the threat of missing trucks that could contain bombs. In Washington, the Secretary of State called Yemen a regional and global threat.
It's time for the international community to make it clear to Yemen that there are expectations and conditions on our continuing support for the government.
That support runs deep. U.S. missiles attacked a suspected al-Qaeda stronghold in Yemen on December 17th and supported a Yemeni strike on December 24th. The Obama administration is budgeting $63 million in aid for Yemen this year, a 56% increase, in addition to millions more spent on counterterrorism. But Yemen's government has in the past cut deals with al-Qaeda, even freeing returned Guantanamo prisoners.
I don't know that Yemen is a failed state, but it is a failing state. And Sana'a, the capital, is probably the only place where the government has real traction.
Like Pakistan, Yemen has lawless areas in the north and south. It's also where the USS Cole was bombed in 2000, and where radical cleric Anwar al-Awlaki, linked to both the Fort Hood shooter and the Christmas Day airline bombing suspect, now lives. In fact, Awlaki was identified in this congressional report 7 years ago as the spiritual advisor to several 9/11 hijackers when they were in San Diego and Virginia.
It's good that we're focused on Yemen today, but we need to have been focused on Yemen for a long time because there have been issues about al-Qaeda and terrorism coming out of Yemen for years.
And tonight, Yemen remains the new ground zero for the global fight against al-Qaeda. Andrea Mitchell, NBC News, Washington.
On another front, there was a grim reminder of al-Qaeda's presence in Afghanistan last week, a bombing that killed 7 Americans. It turns out the dead were CIA agents. The killer was someone they trusted, a double agent said to be on a deadly mission. We have exclusive details tonight from our own Richard Engels here with us in the studio. Richard, good evening.
A deadly mission indeed. This was one of the worst attacks ever against the CIA and has major implications about how the U.S. uses, finds, and recruits agents and informants. At the CIA Memorial Wall at Langley, stars mark the fallen officers. Soon, 7 more will go up. For Harold Brown Jr., Scott Roberson, and 5 others. Overseas, Jordan's King Abdullah and his queen Rania felt the attack as well. They received the body of the king's distant cousin this weekend, an intelligence officer killed along with the Americans. But who carried out the attack is only now becoming clear. A spy story of informants and betrayal that begins in the Jordanian town of Zarqa. Harsh, dusty, on the desert's edge, Zarqa has long been a stronghold for Islamic militants. And in Zarqa, just over a year ago, Jordanian authorities arrested a 36-year-old doctor, Humam al-Bilawi. Bilawi had aroused suspicion by moderating al-Qaeda's most popular website. The Jordanians interrogated Bilawi. and thought they turned him. He agreed to become an informant for both Jordanian intelligence and their partners in the CIA. Bilawi was given a dangerous mission to infiltrate al-Qaeda and find Osama bin Laden's elusive deputy, Ayman al-Zawahiri. Bilawi left Jordan for Afghanistan and seemed a perfect agent. He was interviewed by an al-Qaeda website in September. He seemed accepted. I was raised to love jihad and martyrdom, he said, but was the rhetoric just part of Bilawi's cover? Or did he believe it?
In the same way that we're trying to use drone aircraft to go after the senior leaders of al-Qaeda, they're sophisticated enough to understand the use of human cruise missiles and targeting us in the same reverse way.
And just before New Year's, Bilawi began another secret mission to target his intelligence handlers for al-Qaeda.
You never can trust people. You can polygraph them, you can run them for years, but you know what really goes on inside of their minds, it's very, very difficult to predict.
Bilawi called his intelligence contacts, claiming to have urgent information, a possible major breakthrough about Zawahiri. The CIA, sources say, assembled a team of top officers. They're al-Qaeda experts. But when Bilawi arrived on the CIA compound in eastern Afghanistan, he detonated a bomb.
In its only comment on the incident, Brian, the CIA said the deaths of its officers will be avenged.
Richard Engel here with us in New York. I know you're on your way to Yemen now for this other front in the war against terror, so we'll be talking to you on television. Safe travels here on in. A story in the New York Times Sunday magazine due out to coincide with the one-year anniversary of President Obama's inauguration says Barack Obama spent a lot of inauguration weekend in briefings about what was considered a very real security threat, a report that Somali terrorists were coming over the border with Canada to set off bombs in this country. The story, confirmed today by the White House, contends it was Hillary Clinton who asked what the strategy should be if bombs went off on the National Mall during the president's live televised inaugural address. At a time right now when the administration's under pressure on its handling of the terrorist issue. The article stresses the kinds of threats the White House has been dealing with since before taking the oath of office. We also learned today there was another uninvited guest at that White House state dinner back in November. This one was traveling with the official delegation from India and blended in with those who were invited, apparently. Secret Service says the person was screened at the delegation's hotel and posed no threat and didn't come into any contact with the president or first lady. In Las Vegas today, a gunman walked into a federal courthouse there and opened fire with a shotgun, killing one security officer, wounding a deputy U.S. Marshal. The shooter was chased from the building by officers who fired on him as he left. He died of multiple gunshot wounds. Gunman had been identified as a 66-year-old retiree, reportedly angry over cuts to Social Security benefits. When our broadcast continues, as we start a new week on this Monday night, the symptoms women should never ignore. First part of our special series here this week on women's health. And later, why should the day be over just because the school day is over? From Chicago tonight, our Making a Difference report. This week here, we have a special series of reports on women's health, beginning with one of the most basic, most important subjects, medical symptoms that women too often ignore. Our chief medical editor, Dr. Nancy Snyderman, reports on the possible warning signs that should never be shrugged off.
It didn't seem like a big deal. When Julie Balmer was 25, she would perspire heavily all the time, even in the dead of winter. The doctors said not to worry.
They just said that I was young and I was active and, you know, I was always on the go. And that was basically what they told me. They would send me home.
But she would feel her heart racing.
Feeling sensitive to temperature, overwhelming anxiety, Balmer was eventually diagnosed with thyroid disease, which is 8 times more common in women.
The field of women's health is more than reproductive medicine. It's how we approach all types of disease and well-being in women. There are a few symptoms that women simply cannot ignore.
If you do experience consistent abnormal bloating, pain, especially in the abdominal area and the pelvic area, that is different for you, these are symptoms that you really should seek help for.
These could be symptoms of a serious condition like ovarian cancer. And while it's tough to detect this type of cancer early, if you have these symptoms for weeks, it's time to go to a doctor.
My mom started going to bathroom more often, and she started losing some weight even though she was constantly eating.
Weight loss, frequent urination, constant thirst could be signs of early diabetes.
I thought I was waking from a nightmare because it felt like a knife was piercing my heart. I sat up and I took antacids.
Symptoms of the #1 killer of women, heart disease, were ignored for years by Linda Bugbee. We know about chest pain and overwhelming fatigue for heart disease, but women can experience other symptoms, shortness of breath, or for Bugbee, severe indigestion. In her case, it was a blocked artery which could have caused a heart attack. Even with these red flags in mind, experts say that sometimes it's still difficult getting women to the doctor.
Women tend to be the caregivers in the family. They're making about 70% of the medical decisions in the family, but frequently they're putting their own health on the back burner. Wonderful.
Knowing the symptoms and preventing disease, educating women about their health. Dr. Nancy Snyderman, NBC News, New York.
By the way, there is more on these symptoms women should not ignore and all of our special series about women's health. It's on our website at nightly.msnbc.com. When we come back here tonight, architecture buffs can begin their trek to see it, the new record holder for the title, tallest building in the world.
All these buildings and mountains, slowly they'll arise before
Party in Dubai tonight because the world has a new record holder for the title of tallest building in the world, just in time for something of an economic collapse in Dubai and a scramble to find tenants to fill up the building. How big is it? Over half a mile high. Put it this way. You could just about stack 2 Empire State Buildings on top of each other and come up with the height of this new building named the Burj Khalifa. We're going to be watching the weather for you around this country this week. From the northern plains to New England, the Gulf of Mexico, Arctic air has sent temperatures plunging to well below normal levels, even considering it's January. Even Florida is freezing. Temperatures supposed to drop to 20 degrees tonight in Jacksonville. That would be a record low. And then a major eastern storm will late in the week deserve a close watch. She was believed to be the last person alive to remember the San Francisco earthquake. Funeral services were held today for Jeanette Trapani. She was just 4 years old when the devastating 1906 quake and the subsequent fire killed thousands, almost destroyed the city of San Francisco. Family members say she never forgot the smell of smoke from that day. She lived to be 107. Her survivors include 12 great-grandchildren. The idea was you could lift up the plastic head of a cartoon character and find a piece of candy. Now, it may not sound great in the abstract, but the idea became the Pez dispenser, a candy and collectible institution, and the man who had that idea has died. Curtis Alina was 87 years old. He was an immigrant to this country, the only member of his family to survive the Holocaust. Today, the product launched by his idea is available in 80 nations around the world. We'll take a break. We're back in a moment with our Making a Difference report, how to make sure learning doesn't stop at the end of the school day. We're going to close the broadcast tonight with a Making a Difference report. In the city of Chicago, as you may well know, the name Daley gets some attention. Sometimes it's Mayor Daley, sometimes it's Mrs. Daley, Maggie Daley, the First Lady of Chicago. 2 decades ago, it occurred to her that idle time after school can be a bad thing for kids who might be up to no good. As a result, the day now goes longer for many of them because of the need to turn out better kids. The story tonight from NBC's Rahema Ellis.
When the deadly gang beating of a 16-year-old honor student in Chicago was caught on tape recently, it struck a raw nerve. It even got Washington's attention and led to a rare meeting between federal officials and area teams.
Hands went out. One thing they all ask, we want mentors. We want mentors. They're struggling to learn values. They want help.
And officials say they need help to create more programs like this, providing opportunities for success some teens never imagined.
I had no idea how to paint when I started, and now I know more. Now I can call myself a multimedia artist.
It's Chicago's nonprofit program, After School Matters. Up to 25,000 high schoolers around the city keep learning long after the final bell.
They have potential.
Chicago's First Lady, Maggie Daley, spearheaded the idea almost 20 years ago.
That time from after school till 7 o'clock is such vulnerable times for so many youngsters. So why not, let's not make it vulnerable, well, let's make it great.
Through apprenticeships, teens get training and out-of-school experience in one of 5 different areas. Art students have their work professionally displayed and sold, while students here in the sports program learn how to coach. And like everything else about After School Matters, there are real-life incentives. At the end of the 10-week program, they get paid and get the chance for a job to teach younger kids sports. The program, with training from professional instructors, has had a measurable impact on kids.
It's a way to get out my emotions in a positive way.
According to a 2007 study, teens in After School Matters stayed out of trouble more and were nearly 2.5 times more likely to graduate than students who did not participate. Crucial training where the learning continues beyond school. Rahima Ellis, NBC News, Chicago.
That's our broadcast for this Monday night. Thank you for being with us. I'm Brian Williams. We hope to see you right back here tomorrow evening. Good night.